The following video contains language that may be inappropriate for young viewers. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Welcome to Behind the Bars, where we bring the unseen and the unheard stories from the depths of the prison system to the forefront. I'm your host, Jason Boss, and together we'll explore the madness, the chaos, and the harsh realities hidden behind the steel doors of prisons worldwide. From the local jailhouse to death row across the world, we'll show you the isolation, the seclusion, and the decades spent enduring unimaginable conditions. These are the stories of survival, struggle, and humanity in places most of us will never see. We're here to shine a light on what society often forgets, the voices of the incarcerated. Each story is real, each voice is authentic, and every moment reveals the raw, unfiltered truth of life behind the bars. Join me for a journey like no other, a journey into the darkness, the truth, and the resilience of the human spirit. This is Behind the Bars, real life, real stories. Welcome to Behind the Bars. I'm your host, Jason Boss, and today we're stepping into the Wild West, modern day Tombstone, Arizona, where the legends of outlaws and shootouts are still alive in unexpected ways. This isn't a movie. It's the real-life story of Barry Chappel. Barry is serving a natural life sentence in prison for a shootout straight out of the Old West, fueled by a dangerous cocktail of methamphetamine, drugs, and a delusion. Barry's story is one of a gunfight over a woman, a deadly showdown with Leroy that left Leroy dead and Barry behind bars for life. But Barry's story is more than just a shootout. It's a look into the mind of a man consumed by a lifestyle that led him to make a fateful choice. A choice that changed his life forever. Barry Chappell may have been sentenced to life, but today, he's sharing his story with Behind the Bars. From Tombstone, Arizona to a lifetime in prison, this is his tale of regret, survival, and reflection. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Barry Chappell, and these are his stories.
I'm just an old Southern man, basically my background, I come from the South, and you're brought up with a moral system because you're in the Bible Belt anyway,
Mm-hmm.
And I was Christian for over 50 years of practicing Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And to go to the Father world the way of Messiah was it was something I looked for all my life,
Mm-hmm.
And I never found within the church.
Mm-hmm. Now, you were practicing, you were into religion prior to your crime?
Absolutely.
Okay. So tell me how this went down exactly. What I noticed when I was reading a couple different stories about this is one big part of this is it looked like there was methamphetamines involved in this.
I would say it wasn't a driving factor, but it was like the thing that kicked me through the doorway, so to speak. It releases your inhibitions.
Mm-hmm. And
but as far as this started before that come into play, actually, the situation.
Right. Were you living in Tombstone at the time?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I had been in Tombstone almost 3 years when it happened.
And from the research that I can see, Tombstone is like a tourist town. And they literally had a shootout with Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday is what this town is known for. Is that correct?
That's its claim thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only reason it still exists.
How old were you when you moved into Tombstone, Arizona?
57 years old.
57 years old. And prior to that age, had you been into drugs?
No, I've been off and on since the late 70s.
Oh,
But I had responsibility, so I guess you would call I was a functioning addict.
Okay. And
more or less a weekend warrior.
Okay, and your drug of choice was methamphetamines?
No. My drug of choice was Dilaudid.
Was what?
Dilaudid.
What is that?
It's synthetic morphine.
Oh, okay. Synthetic morphine. Okay, and so how did you...
Some people call it hospital heroin.
Oh, okay. How were you able to get a hold of it? So it's just basically an opioid is what that is?
Yeah. In the late 70s, I got tied up in the cocaine business. You need something to bring you down from it. So I discovered heroin was good for that, And course, that was on and off thing. And after the heroin quality went down in the 80s, I focused on the pharmaceuticals, because you know what you're getting.
So in the 70s, in the 70s, I guess, how old were you when you were into coke and when you were into heroin? How old were you?
Late 20s.
Late 20s. Okay, and
25 to 30 was my heavy use years.
The heavy use years were when?
When I was 25 to 30 years old.
25. So you had a 5-year span of heavy use, and that was during that time heroin mostly, or an opioid?
It was psychedelics. I'd been in the military from the time I was 17 to I was 24.
Okay.
And after I was released from Mississippi National Guard, I left the state and started traveling around surveying.
Okay.
And at the time, I was making good money and no responsibilities after having gone through 2 marriages prior to being 24 years old.
Okay.
I'm ready to flex my wings.
So take me back again. You're 25 to 30, heavy usage, but you said psychedelics. And so how did we get from opioids into psychedelics? Where was your...
Well, this is the thing, too. From the time I was 24 to 30, I lived in Louisiana, Tennessee, South Carolina, Florida, back over to Oklahoma, back down into Texas again. I was making around survey, and I moved the average of twice a year, so I was meeting different people.
And
when you're in
Go ahead.
I was meeting different people because I was hiring people for these jobs for these surveys. I was on my cruise where I was at each city. And of course, you meet the locals.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you run into different substances, just by the people you associate with, of course.
Right. And you said you were in the military from 17 to 24. What branch of the military were you in?
I was in the Mississippi Army National Guard.
The Army National Guard. Okay. And what was your position? What did you do in the military?
I was what's called a wheel and track mechanic. I was basically a tank mechanic.
Wheel and tank. And so was there any significant, let's see, that was, what year were you born, Barry?
54.
1954. So were you in any major wars or excursions or anything during that time, or is the Guard, is the Army National Guard Homeland Security?
Yeah, that's you stay in the state. Of course, you do train out of state. I had trained in Texas in Fort Hood one time, and you had a deployment in summertime for active duty training. But I was stationed in New Jersey and Maryland for my initial training for almost 9 or 10 months initially.
Okay. And so you were discharged out of the military honorably or dishonorably? Honorably. And what did you do after 24? You said at 25. Were you into substances when you were in the Guard, the Army Guard?
Nope.
Okay.
Occasional little weed and some social drinker.
Social drinker. Okay.
I had been married 6 times before I turned 39 years old.
My.
So I was pretty busy,
Yeah.
having to provide for families.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what happened between 24 and 25? Because you said you got into stuff heavily. Who did you meet up with, or how did that incident go down? Why did that pick up?
That is a story there for sure. Well, when I was 24, I got discharged, and whenever that happened, I moved out of state because I just lost my second wife, or she quit me. I think we didn't have the same goals, let's put it that way. So I moved from Mississippi to Memphis, Tennessee, and I started kind of sowing my oats. And I run into some new dancers, and they have their whole lifestyle is based on the nighttime in clubs. So when you do that, you get into let's say, the enemy side, staying up all night.
Okay.
They're the ones that turned me onto the needle.
Okay, so it was you basically went from you'd never used a needle before. Do you know what year you first started using the needle?
78.
78. Okay. And what did you start slamming when you were slamming that?
Cocaine.
Coke. Okay, so you started with Coke, and then did you move to heroin, or did you just slam everything, or you just slammed everything?
Yeah, once we do cocaine, especially it was coming straight from Pablo Escobar at the time. I was paying $1,500 an ounce in '78, but it was uncut.
Right,
and that stuff was your head off.
Yeah, and so when you started slamming, what were you doing for work? How did you pay for this to begin with?
I was a surveyor. I was basically a sanitary sewer inspector. I'd go around doing studies through the company that was based out of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, that worked for the EPA. We had to do evaluation studies of these cities, of their sanitary sewers, where they could be federally funded. Mm-hmm. This was required by the government every 20 years. So we go in there and do these evaluation studies so we could rehab the sewer systems and do whatever is necessary.
And so you were an active needle slammer during those years of being a surveyor?
Yep.
So you're pretty much, most of your life has been on something. Is that what you would say up until the event in Tombstone?
Well, like I said, when I got about 30 years old, it was in '84, and I had kind of gotten tired of that because at the time my fourth marriage was crapping out.
Okay.
And I moved back to Mississippi, and I started what I called settled down. I called guerrilla farming. I was growing weed out in the swamps in Mississippi and on people's lands that I would just find me a spot next to a creek somewhere and start.
Okay. 30 years old. It's 1984. You are now in, I think you said Mississippi. Is that where you were growing weed? Okay.
Yep.
So you go there, you decide this is the way to go, and this is after you ended up with a monkey, essentially what I would say is a monkey on your back, right? In the days right after.
The monkey wants you.
Oh, yeah.
He gets to scratching your back. You know?
Yeah. That, and a lot of people that have never had an addiction have zero idea what a monkey on the back is like. But, for those who think they are innocent to any kind of addictions, if you're out there drinking coffee, try stop drinking coffee and see what happens to you. You guys will be fiending back, and that's called an addiction. All right, Barry. Get it.
I'm going to tell you, what really set the bar for me really high was when I was in the military. See, I raced stock cars. Because
adrenaline junkie.
I got tied up with racing dirt cars, and I did that from 75 to 80 when I was not 74 to 78, about 4 years probably. But you get addicted to adrenaline.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing like slamming cars out there in front of a couple thousand people.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Anybody with any form of addiction, you can get an addiction jumping out of an airplane. The people just can't get high enough, and that's the only way that they can achieve that style of high. And the human body is very, very interesting. Okay, so 1975 to 1980, you basically ended up with an adrenaline monkey first, and then it was during that time, I guess, right? So it was 78-ish. You were driving the cars when you were with the dancing women. Is that correct?
No, that's when I got out of the military. I left Mississippi, and that's where I left driving cars behind.
Mm-hmm. All right. So
when I moved back in '80, I did drive for the guy I used to drive for one summer, but of course he didn't know I was an addict, so he probably wouldn't let me in his car.
Yeah.
But I even, we walked that street, unless I got mad. But really, that's what started that need to speed, I guess, with some cars.
Yep. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So you went, though, it seems like you did make a change when you went down into, when you were 30 years old in 1984 and you were growing marijuana in Mississippi. Were you still slamming anything at that time?
Occasionally, yeah.
And so
this was just whatever.
Anything you could get your hands on?
My customers. Well, it wasn't so much that whatever I get my hands on, it wasn't whatever the opportunity presented itself.
Right. Okay.
Because I would grow, I would harvest in October, and I'd usually carry it up around Thanksgiving up in Oklahoma because I'd make connections up there and sell it in guns. And people would bring me guns for my marijuana, and I could get more. I would take what I made a knockoff and go double it, and distribute and sell that.
So you were just swapping out marijuana for guns and then flopping it that way?
And carrying the guns and money to Oklahoma and buying more marijuana.
And so during all of these times that you were doing this, did you ever end up with the law? Have you been in prison prior to your stay now? Okay. So would you consider yourself?
They tried to.
Go ahead.
They tried.
Mm-hmm.
I've had them get close. I always had that little voice I would listen to.
Mm.
I've got up and left houses and find out hours later it got raided.
Mm-hmm.
The people that I was dealing with and find out some of them got killed. Death was no stranger to me, so it's just, when you get a mindset of adrenaline, be it smuggling and running marijuana interstate, and those kind of people that carry firearms on them all the time, it's hard just to settle back down into a 9-to-5, which I had to. But I was like, it's like they tried to say I was bipolar, but it actually wasn't. Sometimes I had like a split personality. I could be very rational, but I also could be very irrational.
Okay.
And
let's take it.
Could push you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let's take it back to 1984. I'm trying to get a timeline up into the event in Tombstone. What happened past that? How long did you grow marijuana for? When did that end? Where'd you go from there?
For about 3 years, and I met my 5th wife, and that marriage, I was working 9-to-5 in 87. And then that didn't last for a year and a half, 2 years. The 80s was kind of blurry. And I met my 6th wife, and I was with her up till 92 or 3. It was 92. Yeah.
Okay.
But
so
it was changing people, my whole way of living, jobs, wives, friends.
And what kind of job were you doing between 5th wife and either 4th wife and 5th wife, or from basically 82 to 92? What were you doing for a job?
Well, I went from a marijuana grower to paving streets for the city of Jackson, Mississippi for 2 or 3 years, which was good money. Dirty work.
Yeah, right.
And I started in the construction business.
Okay. So
and I did that for a long time.
What do you remember what year you started the construction business?
About 89, somewhere in there.
Okay. And so that was
I was already with my 6th wife.
Okay, 6th wife was in 89. Okay, and you've had a total of 6 wives?
7.
Okay. And do any of them keep in contact with you at the moment?
No, but I was married. The 7th wife. We've been married 17 years when we moved to Tombstone in 2011. I married her in February of 74. I met her in 93.
Oh, okay.
And we stayed married all the way so she passed away. We were married 25 years. So 20 years before prison and 25 after I was in.
Okay, and so what you just said there is that you had married a gal in '74, but you had gotten back with her again. Is that what I understand?
No, 94.
94.
Sorry.
Okay, gotcha. Let's continue on. So how did you 2011 when did the event of Tombstone go down? What was the date on that?
July the 9th, 2014.
July the 9th, 2014. Now, let's talk about that. Before we even get into that, let's talk about what you've been in Tombstone for 3 years. What were you doing? What was your job in Tombstone?
I worked on ranches mostly. I was talking handyman, carpenter, plus I trained horses. I worked in a vineyard in my last ranch. He had horses in a vineyard. And basically, I was doing inside work with, handyman, because I've been in construction business. I could be a jack of all trades, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I was gun hunting for my hobbies, and I was doing gunfights.
Okay. You were part of the actual theatrics of Tombstone?
Yes.
I
worked on weekends in OK Corral for 2 years.
Okay. So then I was reading about that today because it sounds like they have a gunfight at 11, 1, and 3 that you have to buy tickets for. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So you were when you were working, so prior to this, you were employed. Was it at the, what was it called? The OK Corral, right? Or something of the sort?
Yeah.
Okay. And this was literally the same place that Doc Holliday and
same.
Yeah, they had the shootout, right? Who was that again? The second guy?
It was the Earps and Holiday went up against the Clantons and the Quarries.
Gotcha. Right. And do you believe the story is correct? Or is it folklore? Or do you think this is?
Oh, I know more about this story than most people.
I bet. So is this
when you live in I knew the town historian very well.
Okay.
I know pictures of me when.
Okay. All right. So you were working at the OK Corral, and July 9th. How long were you working at the OK Corral shootout prior to the July 9th?
Oh, I hadn't worked in the corral for not quite a year, because the group I was working with, we kind of didn't really disband, but we lost some key members. So I started just focusing on working on this ranch on a vineyard and training horses. Plus, I was working at a dude ranch part-time doing gunfights, and I was also working downtown for the city of Tombstone on a Saturday evenings called Tombstone at Twilight. Then I would work a place called Old West Gunfights, which burned to the ground. And so I was just piecemealing out when you've got all the equipment, it's not hard to find work, especially if you've got a reputation for being able to do it. Plus, like I said, I was 9 years before I moved to Tombstone. I was a hunting guide and a caretaker in a 1,000-acre deer camp in Mississippi. I carried a gun every day.
Right. You're in Tombstone, and you're working a couple different places, like the Dude Ranch, some other ranches, and you're also working at the OK Corral. But your team members or something of the sort, they were kind of breaking up a little bit, so you guys didn't have that same kind of gig. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I had to branch out, let's say.
Yeah.
Well, I was look, I've been around the occult. I went on in the late 70s, 80s because of my third wife actually was a black magic woman. She was into the dark arts.
Okay.
I did tarot readings, all that stuff.
Okay. All right. So
cast spells.
All right. Wow, that's interesting. All right. Let's get up to the events of the day that. Well, there's story before that, right? Because you just didn't go out and kill anyone. You there were things going on, and I want to talk about this. All the time you were in Tombstone, I think you said off and on you were still slamming. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so what were you slamming during the years of Tombstone? Was it still methamphetamines or coke?
The logging was up until the last year was off and on very, very irregular, but it wasn't a regular thing. It was every once in a while. It was a money situation.
And how much? And so one more is kind of breaking up on that. What was the drug of choice you were using during the Tombstone days?
Just a little weed.
Okay. But there was you didn't have needles. You were not using anything at that time.
Oh, well, at the time that this happened, I was on methamphetamine.
Okay. And so prior to this, let's talk about what led up to this in your mind right before the shooting. There's a woman involved. What happened? Tell me the story, please.
Well, a year prior to this woman who was a close friend of me and my wife, but she was actually working in the Birdcage Theater, and this is where the fellow also was the manager of the Birdcage Theater.
And we're talking about Leroy Colomy, correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we all knew each other for years. Well, this woman, she let us basically know that she was being sexually abused and called leaving me and my wife. My wife just got tired of dealing with it, and I would answer the call and go see her because she was going to kill myself, blah, 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 this, they were doing this, blah, blah, blah. And a year prior to that, she basically said he raped her one night. I said, well, you need to leave me. And she wouldn't do it. I said, no, I went to him. I said, Leroy, if I ever hear that you've done this again. Well, first I wanted to have a shootout with him, but he wouldn't go for it. Yeah, the next time it won't be optional. And right before the week this happened, I talked to someone who was a second witness. It wasn't no longer his word against hers and hers against his. It was the second party that was confirming her.
Okay.
I actually went to the woman twice that morning before I went to see him. I said, this is happening. If you don't tell me not to, he's a dead man.
Now you were with
I'm one of these people.
You were with your wife at this time as well, correct?
I'd already sent her to Mississippi 2 months prior to this.
Okay, why did you
knew what was going on?
Why did you send her to Mississippi?
What was going on? Because I knew when this happened, that when it finally happened, that she would be run out of town and put such as she thanked me afterwards.
So
for doing that because she.
So for at least 2 months, you knew you were going to shoot this guy.
I didn't know. I just knew something was coming to a head.
And you felt it was so dangerous that you needed to get your wife to safety?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go ahead.
When you're a paranormal investigator, which a ghost hunter is, you get to it's kind of like a little psychic into it just about what's happening, and you know things, supernatural things were happening anyway.
And when
would have called like that?
Right. When were you supernatural ghost hunting? When do you think you had this ability?
6 years prior.
6 years prior.
6 years. 3 years before I moved to Tombstone. In the 3 years I was there, it really got serious.
And you were literally out hunting ghosts?
Yeah.
Okay. That's
to go do investigations.
Okay. So I think that's a good story for another podcast. Let's continue on with this. There was a woman involved. You sent your wife away. The woman has claimed that she had been raped by this gentleman. His name is the victim, Leroy Colomy. And there was another person they concluded with the story, and they said the same thing. And how close, when you heard the second story, now, were you in love with this woman that had been telling you this? Why were you so ambitious to?
I was under her influence. I found out afterwards she was a psychologist, but a lot of things come out afterwards. I think I've been manipulated a lot. Even to this day, I don't know if I was a part of the point of the spear of somebody else was holding, because everyone's dead that knows the truth.
This woman?
Years later.
Okay, this woman is dead. What was this woman's name?
Laura.
Laura. Okay. Now, Laura, how did she die?
Stomach cancer.
Stomach cancer. Okay, so you there's this woman, and you believe that at some level there was a manipulation and she got you so riled up that you decided that Leroy was a very bad dude. What did you do? How did this go down?
I went to his house. He wasn't there. Then I went towards her house looking for him, and I found him in front of her house, and I stepped out of the truck. And this is what's so surreal is when this happened, it's like I reverted back to an actual gunfight. I was cowboyed up. I had my gun on my hip and everything.
Do you have it in?
I stepped out of the vehicle.
You literally had your gun on your hip with a holster?
Yeah.
And so what happened?
I stepped out of the vehicle. We locked eyes, and he started walking towards me. His golf cart was parked between him, me, and my truck. When I stepped out of the truck, he started walking towards his golf cart, which was towards me. I started walking toward him, and he never said nothing. I figured I'd sent word the night before I was coming on his stepson.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured he was ready, because he used to do gunfights too. He did the fantasy shooting. His nickname was Lightning.
This guy was a theatric gunslinger as well?
Yeah, he actually did reenactments before, but he wasn't a tablet. He did where they did the fast throwing shot, the balloon.
Okay. Now, before this incident, when was the last, so you were slamming meth at that point. How much did you pick up before this event? How much were you picking up 8 balls? Were you picking up ounces? How much meth were you, your 8 balls? And so you were.
I just made a connection where I was getting 8 balls.
Okay.
Up to that time, it was just like 20 papers, $20.
Right. Okay.
One shot.
Right. Yeah. And so how much of that 8 ball did you slam before this event?
Well, from Sunday to that Wednesday, I probably did 1.5 grams.
Okay, and for those who do not know,
for 3 days.
Okay, so for those who do not know, an 8 ball is 3.5 grams that is out there. So you basically did, one not a tremendous amount for 3 days. I mean, a lot of people do a lot more to stay up that amount of time. So what that leads me to believe is you weren't actively using at that time, and that really spun you out. Was there anything weird?
It was more than I done. That was the first 8 ball I actually picked up.
Okay.
Like that. But the thing was, yourself, if you can't do this stuff every day and day in and out, keep a job and a wife, it's not possible.
Yep.
Unless she's doing it with you. My wife was not a user.
Right. All right. So I want to make sure
She's probably smoked marijuana.
Right.
2 or 3 times. That's it.
Okay. So hardly at all. Let's finish up with this. So you go to Leroy's house, or no, you go to the girl's house. He's in front of the house. You step out. You shoot him how many times?
Well, he jumped in the golf cart and reached across. I figured he was reaching for a gun, so I shot twice through the windshield.
Did both shots hit him?
Well, one hit him in the chest, and the other one hit the roll bar on the golf cart.
Mm-hmm.
And this time he started coming back out of the golf cart, and that's when I shot the 3rd time, and that one apparently hit him right under his right ear. Well, that's when a very strange thing happened. It never happened before, and never happened since. I went black. I don't know what happened. They said I walked over and shot him 3 times while I was laying on the ground in the back. I didn't come back into my mind until I was walking up to my truck, and a lady who watched it, she said, "Do you feel better now?" And that's when I kind of snapped back to myself, and I twirled my gun back in the holster. I said, "Hell yeah." Okay,
so let me get this straight. So you shot twice and then you blacked out, or you shot 3 times. 2 of the shots hit him. You blacked out, and then you put 3 more into him, but you don't remember those 3.
I don't remember that. I don't remember walking over to him, standing over and shooting 3 times, or walking back to my truck. And she said, "Do you feel better now?" When I come back and start remembering again.
All right, now who said that?
That memory is white clean.
Who said that? Do you feel better?
Witness.
Just a woman. She said, "Do you feel?" So that's kind of an
witness.
One more time.
Huh?
One more time on this.
4 people witnessed this.
And the thing that you remember is an old lady saying, "Do you feel better now?" Does that ring any weird bells? Does it sound weird to you? I mean, does it sound like an awkward thing somebody would say? They should be terrified, right? The witnesses?
She knew me. This woman had known me for almost 3 years this time. She knew all the people. Everybody knows about in this town.
Okay.
This was no secret.
Okay.
In the 2012 election, there was only 600 some people voted for a presidential election, and me and my wife were two of them. I tell you how small it is.
Right. Okay. Well, Barry, it's starting to rain here. For everybody that's out there, guys, this is Barry Chappell. He is a good friend of mine. He's serving time in the Arizona State Penitentiary. This is his very, very first podcast. And if there's any questions that you guys have out there, guys, please put them in the comments. I talk to Barry all the time. I would love to get correspondence between everybody out there and talk to Barry. And we're also looking for those who are good to those who are in prison. And so if you guys are willing to make the rounds and help those who are in prison, we have a lot of opportunities. Guys, thank you very, very much. Barry, thank you very much for being on Behind the Bars.
It's been a pleasure, bro. So thank you.